1942. The mountains of south-central Pennsylvania look exactly as they always have. Quiet ridges draped in oak and hemlock, dirt roads winding through farming communities, where horses still outnumber automobiles, and a silence so complete you can hear the creek at the bottom of the valley from half a mile away. To anyone passing through Adams County on a Sunday afternoon, nothing appears out of the ordinary. No fences, no guards, no signs warning you away. Just the land, the birdsong, and underneath it all, something the United States government was determined you would never know existed. Somewhere beneath Raven Rock Mountain, at a depth that would make your ears pop on the way down, workers were carving out a secret so vast, so deliberately buried, that it would remain classified for more than 70 years, not sealed documents gathering dust in a forgotten archive. A physical place, tunnels wide enough to drive military trucks through side by side, entire buildings suspended from the bedrock on coiled shock-absorbing springs, a command center designed with one singular and chilling purpose: to survive the end of the world happening directly above it. In January 2026, a tranche of previously withheld Defense Department records was quietly released through the National Declassification Center. Documents that had been withheld not for years, but for generations. What those files contained was not a footnote in the margins of history. It was the full architectural blueprint of American doomsday thinking. How far the government had gone, how early it had started, and most disturbingly, how many layers of this underground world still remain officially unacknowledged. The release was made with almost no press coverage, almost no fanfare. Just a batch of files, uploaded on a Tuesday, describing an America that existed entirely beneath the one we thought we knew. This is not a story about a bunker. This is a story about a parallel America, one built in darkness, staffed in secrecy, and engineered with a purpose that becomes more disturbing the deeper you follow it. To understand what was being constructed beneath those Pennsylvania mountains, you first need to understand what the men in Washington genuinely believed was coming for them. By 1942, American military planners had studied the German bombing campaigns over London with cold clinical precision. The Blitz had not broken Britain, but it had demonstrated something far more alarming than simple destruction. It had shown that a modern capital city, its government, its chain of command, its entire institutional apparatus, could be paralyzed not through ground invasion, but through sustained aerial bombardment. And in the corridors of the War Department, men who had spent their careers thinking about the unthinkable began asking a question that had no comfortable answer. What if that happened here? Washington, D.C. was, by any military logic, catastrophically indefensible. It sat in a flat river basin, visible from the air for miles in every direction, its government buildings clustered so tightly together that a single coordinated airstrike could decapitate the entire executive and military apparatus of the United States in a single afternoon. The President, the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of War, all operating within blocks of each other, above ground, visible, reachable. What worked for London in peacetime was a liability in wartime that no general could ignore. The solution was not to harden Washington. The solution was to hollow out a mountain 60 miles away and move the most critical functions of American military command beneath it. But the scale of what followed was something that even the planners themselves struggled to articulate. This was not a single facility dug into a single hillside. Across wartime America, the government launched a construction program of almost incomprehensible ambition. Underground command posts, hardened communications relays, buried fuel and supply depots, subterranean hospitals, tunnel networks linking facilities that appeared from the surface to have no connection to each other whatsoever. Billions of dollars in 1940s currency flowed into projects that appeared on no public ledger, were approved in no congressional hearing that any member of the public would ever read, and were assigned names deliberately chosen to be forgettable. Raven Rock Mountain was designated simply as Site R, not a name meant to inspire, a name engineered to disappear. The workforce presented its own extraordinary logistical challenge. Thousands of laborers had to be recruited, transported, housed, and paid, all while maintaining the fiction that nothing unusual was happening in the Pennsylvania mountains. Some workers were told they were constructing a conventional military communications relay. Others were compartmentalized so precisely that the man operating the drilling equipment in the eastern tunnel section had no knowledge of what was being built 50 yards away in the western one. The government had studied secrecy the way an engineer studies load-bearing calculations. As a structural necessity, not a preference, a single leak, a single overheard conversation in a roadside diner could unravel years of work. And the fear driving all of this was genuine. American intelligence had assembled disturbing fragments of evidence suggesting German long-range aviation programs, efforts exploring the possibility of transatlantic strikes against the eastern seaboard. The threat was real enough to authorize spending on a scale that, had it become public knowledge, would have provoked either panic or fury. Probably both. What the American public saw during those years was a government projecting calm confidence. War bond drives, presidential radio addresses, the steady industrial hum of a nation at war. What they did not see, what they were specifically and deliberately prevented from seeing, was the parallel infrastructure being bored and blasted into existence beneath their feet, constructed on the working assumption that everything above ground might one day need to be replaced. The excavation of Site R went deep, far deeper than any conventional construction project of the period would require. Workers blasted and carved through solid granite, removing millions of tons of rock and disposing of it in ways calibrated not to attract attention or raise questions about the sheer volume of material being extracted from a site that, officially, barely existed. Roads were widened to accommodate heavy equipment, then quietly restored to their original width once the machinery had passed. Local residents in the surrounding communities noticed the deep, rhythmic rumbling in their floorboards during certain months. They were told it was routine highway improvement work. Most accepted the explanation. A few did not, but in wartime America, asking persistent questions about government activity was a social hazard most people were not willing to risk. What emerged from those years of blasting and boring was not a bunker in any conventional sense of the word. Site R was, in effect, an underground city. 5 separate buildings, each 3 stories tall, were constructed inside the carved granite cavern. And here is where the engineering becomes genuinely extraordinary. They were not touching the rock walls. They were not resting directly on the floor of the mountain. They were suspended on enormous coiled springs, each one engineered to absorb the shock wave generated by a nuclear detonation at the surface. The buildings swayed, almost imperceptibly, when heavy machinery operated nearby. Engineers had designed them to survive a world in which nothing above them survived. But there was a problem. The deeper the construction crews bored into the mountain, the more aggressively the water came. Granite that appears impermeable from the outside is threaded at depth with fissures and underground streams, and Raven Rock's geology was no exception. Pumps ran continuously, around the clock, for the entire construction period and beyond. Workers in the lower tunnel sections labored in conditions that were perpetually damp. Walls weeping with groundwater, the air thick with the cold mineral smell of wet stone, boots that never fully dried between shifts. Health records from this construction period, surfacing now in the 2026 declassification release, document a rate of respiratory illness among the workforce that was noted by government physicians at the time, and then quietly removed from any report intended to circulate beyond classified channels. The workers who built the facility that was supposed to save American leadership were themselves considered an acceptable casualty of the secrecy surrounding it. Life inside the completed facility was, by the fragmentary accounts of those permitted to discuss it in any form, a study in controlled disorientation. There was no natural light, no windows, no sense of morning or evening beyond what the artificial lighting systems dictated. The ventilation maintained a temperature that was stable but relentlessly artificial, a cool that never became warmth, an air that carried the faint metallic taste of oxygen recirculated through systems that hummed in the constant background of every conversation, every meeting, every meal. Personnel assigned to Site R for extended rotations reported what military psychiatrists at the time delicately described as adjustment difficulties, a clinical phrase that covered everything from chronic insomnia to more acute psychological disturbances that the records even now decline to specify with any precision. The facility had its own power plant, its own water reserves, fuel storage sufficient for indefinite operation without any surface connection. It had a medical suite, a cafeteria, sleeping quarters for several hundred personnel, and a communication center engineered to reach every military command post in the continental United States simultaneously. It had a command room that, in the event of nuclear war, was designated to become the operational headquarters of the United States Armed Forces, the room from which America's response to Armageddon would be coordinated, transmitted, and executed. What those records reveal next, however, is even more disturbing than the physical conditions of the facility. The psychological architecture of Site R, the way it was designed to function during an actual nuclear emergency, exposes something about the government's assumptions that the official history has been consistently reluctant to confront. This was not a facility designed for a 3-day crisis, not for a week of elevated tensions followed by a diplomatic resolution. The water reserves, the fuel capacity, the self-contained food storage, the completely independent power generation, all of it pointed to a facility built to sustain operations for months, possibly much longer. The implications were not lost on the men who understood what they were building. In the event of a strike on Washington, the personnel inside Site R would survive. The men and women above ground would not. And the facility had been designed with such thorough self-sufficiency precisely because its planners had already accepted as a formal engineering assumption that there would be nothing left on the surface to resupply it. The underground America they were constructing was not a temporary shelter. It was a replacement, a new seat of power, ready to emerge from the granite the moment the old one was turned to ash. Records tell a different story than the official one when it comes to Site R's relationship with nuclear weapons themselves. The 2026 declassified documents include procurement records that have never previously entered any public forum, records indicating that Site R was, at various points during its operational life, home to the command authorization systems for nuclear strike orders. Not the warheads themselves, but something arguably more consequential: the mechanisms by which the decision to use them would be made, verified, and transmitted to launch crews. Raven Rock Mountain was not merely a survival shelter for government officials. It was the place from which the next nuclear war might be ordered. The mountain in Pennsylvania was not just a bunker, it was a trigger. The secrecy surrounding this dimension of the facility's purpose was maintained through classification layers so dense that individual departments operating inside the same underground complex were legally prohibited from knowing what adjacent departments were authorized to do. The compartmentalization was not merely bureaucratic caution. It was a deliberate architectural principle, a system engineered to ensure that no single person, no single crisis of conscience, no single leak could ever expose the complete picture of what lived inside the mountain. When the Second World War ended in 1945, Site R did not close. It expanded. The transition from wartime secrecy to Cold War secrecy was, for the facility beneath Raven Rock Mountain, essentially seamless. The threat calculus shifted from German long-range bombers to Soviet ballistic missiles. But the fundamental logic of the place remained not just unchanged, but validated by the new geopolitical reality. If anything, the end of the war made Site R more important, not less. The Soviet Union's first successful nuclear test in 1949 transformed the facility from an elaborate contingency plan into an active operational necessity. New tunnels were added, new systems installed. The springs beneath those suspended buildings were tested and recertified. The mountain was quietly, thoroughly modernized for a new kind of war. But questions began accumulating in the decades that followed. Questions that the government's carefully maintained silence only made more persistent. Local residents in the communities near Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania, reported phenomena that resisted easy dismissal. Vibrations felt deep in the foundations of farmhouses during periods when no visible surface construction activity was taking place. Unusual electromagnetic interference affecting communications equipment in the surrounding area during intervals that correlated, though the correlation cannot be officially confirmed, with elevated national security alert levels. A stretch of road near the facility's main surface entrance that has been quietly repaved multiple times across 15 years, despite carrying almost no civilian traffic. Small things, the kind of things that individually could be explained away. The kind of things that, in accumulation, cannot. In 2019, a journalist attempting to document the perimeter of the facility from a public road was approached by personnel in unmarked civilian vehicles within 4 minutes of stopping his car. He had not yet raised his camera. The approach was courteous. The conversation was brief. He was advised, without particular hostility, to continue along the road. He did. The facility, described in current government communications as a support installation for the Pentagon, neither confirms nor denies operational activity. It simply exists behind its fence line, beyond the tree line, beneath the mountain that gives nothing away. What the 2026 declassified documents have confirmed, and what every previous official account carefully avoided confirming, is that Site R remained an active command facility through the entire arc of the Cold War, through the collapse of the Soviet Union, through the morning of September 11, 2001, when Vice President Dick Cheney was evacuated there within hours of the attacks on New York and Washington. The documents extend to a certain date. Beyond that date, the pages are either blank or absent. What the facility is doing today, what systems it currently houses, what it is prepared to do in the event of a crisis that meets a threshold we are not authorized to know, none of that is in the release, because none of that was released. Raven Rock Mountain sits today much as it has always sat, quiet, unremarkable from the road that curves beneath it, green in summer, gray in winter, keeping its own counsel with the patience of old granite. The trees do not announce what is underneath them. The mountain does not advertise what it has held for the better part of a century. If you drove past it on a Tuesday morning without knowing where to look, you would see nothing unusual, which is, of course, precisely the point. What the story of Site R ultimately reveals is not simply the existence of one underground facility in one Pennsylvania mountain. It reveals a philosophy, a governing assumption that runs as a continuous thread through American national security thinking from the early 1940s to the present day. The assumption is this: the surface world is fragile. The institutions we construct above ground are vulnerable. The only infrastructure that can truly be trusted is the kind that cannot be seen, cannot be reached, and cannot be confirmed by anyone without the appropriate clearance and the willingness to go underground to find it. The documents released in January 2026 gave us a partial window into that world, carefully selected. Its edges trimmed by classification reviewers who made deliberate decisions about what the public was now permitted to understand. What remains withheld, by definition, we cannot assess. What we can say is that the portion revealed is extraordinary enough to reframe everything we believed we understood about where American power actually lives, not in the Capitol building, not in the White House, but in the dark, in the granite, beneath mountains whose names appear on no headline and in no history book taught to any child in any school. We know about Site R because they finally, partially, let us know. A controlled admission, a calculated release. The question that follows from that, the one with no comfortable answer and no declassified file to resolve it, is how many others there are, how many mountains, in how many states are doing right now what Raven Rock was built to do in 1943. Waiting. Ready? Silent as stone. They know. The mountain knows. Neither one is talking.